Think about the last tradition you kept. Maybe it was the way your family eats together on a particular day. Maybe it was a greeting you give at a certain time of year. Maybe it was something you wear, something you cook, something you say out loud to mark a moment that feels important. You did it because it felt right, because it felt like yours. But here is what nobody told you. The odds are overwhelming that you did not invent it. You did not choose it. You inherited it from people you never met, who lived in places you have never seen, who needed that tradition for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with your life today. And yet, here you are, keeping it, feeling it, calling it yours. That is the quiet strangeness at the heart of every human culture. Traditions do not announce themselves as borrowed. They arrive wrapped in familiarity, in the warmth of repetition, in the faces of people you love doing the same thing their parents did. By the time you are old enough to ask where a tradition came from, you are already too attached to question it. What does it mean to live inside a tradition that was never designed for you? Anthropologist Edward Shils spent decades studying this question. In his landmark 1981 work simply titled Tradition, Shils argued that most of what humans call culture is not created fresh by each generation. It is transmitted, it is handed forward like a relay baton, often without the runner ever seeing the full race. The person carrying the baton rarely knows who started it, how far it has traveled, or what the original course looked like. They only know that their job is to keep running, and so they run. Consider the foods that define your cultural identity, the dish your grandmother made that feels irreplaceable, that tastes like home, that you would describe as deeply traditional. Trace that dish back through time, and almost without exception, you will find it is younger than you think. The tomato, now inseparable from Italian cuisine, did not arrive in Italy until the 16th century, brought by Spanish colonizers from the Americas. The chili pepper, the backbone of Thai and Indian cooking, is similarly American in origin. The potato, the symbol of Irish identity and suffering, was grown in the Andes for thousands of years before it ever touched European soil. What feels ancient is often recent. What feels local is often global. What feels like yours arrived from somewhere else and got so comfortable it stopped mentioning where it came from. This is what cultural theorist Eric Hobsbawm called the invention of tradition. In his 1983 collection, The Invention of Tradition, Hobsbawm and his colleagues documented case after case of practices that felt ancient but were actually constructed within living memory, often deliberately, to serve political or social purposes their participants never suspected. The Scottish Highland kilt, the symbol of ancient Gaelic identity, was largely a 19th century Romantic invention. The formal ceremonies of the British monarchy, which feel timeless and eternal, were mostly formalized in the late 1800s during a period of intense national anxiety. The traditions that feel most permanent are often the ones most recently built. You are not unusual for not knowing this. It is the nature of tradition to erase its own origins. A tradition that announced itself as invented last Tuesday would not survive a single generation. It works precisely because it feels old, because it feels inevitable, because it feels like the world would be wrong without it. But now comes the part that cuts deeper. You are not just passively inheriting these traditions, you are actively reinforcing them. Every time you keep a tradition, you are casting a vote for its continuation. You are adding your weight to the chain that will carry it forward to people who are not yet born. Those future people will keep it not because they chose it, but because you kept it, and the people before you kept it, and by the time it reaches them, it will feel as old as the mountains. This is what sociologist Anthony Giddens described as the reflexive nature of modern tradition. In his work on modernity and self-identity, Giddens argued that in pre-modern societies, tradition was simply the water you swam in, unquestioned, invisible, total. But in the modern world, you have the unique and uncomfortable ability to step outside the current and look at it. You can ask, why do I do this? Where did this come from? Does this still serve the purpose it was built for? Most people, even in the modern world, never ask. And the reason is profound. Traditions are not just behaviors, they are containers for belonging. When you keep a tradition, you are not just performing an action. You are signaling membership. You are saying, I am one of these people. I know the words to this song. I know how to fold this thing, cook this dish, bow at this moment. The tradition is the password. Without it, you are outside the circle. This is why traditions survive even when people no longer believe in the reasons behind them. Researcher Pascal Boyer, a cognitive anthropologist who has studied ritual and belief across dozens of cultures, found that people consistently continue rituals long after they have forgotten or stopped believing in the original justification. The behavior outlives the belief. The container persists after the water has drained out. You light the candle not because you know why candles are lit, but because your mother lit it and her mother lit it, and to not light it would feel like a kind of small death. This is not weakness, it is deeply human. The brain is a pattern completion machine. It registers the absence of a familiar pattern as discomfort, sometimes as threat. Traditions create grooves in the nervous system. Missing them feels wrong in the body before the mind has a chance to explain why. Now take this inward. Think about one tradition in your life that you keep without fully understanding why. Maybe it is a holiday practice. Maybe it is a food rule. Maybe it is a gesture of respect or a form of greeting that your family has always done. Ask yourself, do you know where this came from? Do you know what problem it was originally solving? Do you know who designed it? The honest answer for most people is no. And this creates a strange kind of intimacy with the past. You are living inside the decisions of strangers, people who worried about different things than you worry about, people who were trying to survive harvests, or navigate political power, or make sense of death, or bind a community together against forces that no longer exist. They built these practices for their world. Their world disappeared. The practices remained. You are the heir of solutions to problems you do not have. This becomes even stranger when you zoom out to cultural scale. Consider the greeting rituals between countries. The Japanese bow, the French kiss on the cheek, the Thai wai, pressing palms together, the American handshake. Each of these feels natural and obvious to those who grew up with it and deeply foreign to those who did not. Each carries within it centuries of negotiated meaning about hierarchy, about hygiene, about war and peace, about what bodies are allowed to touch and when. The American handshake, which feels like pure practicality, likely evolved from a gesture meant to show that your right hand held no weapon. The cheek kiss of Mediterranean cultures carries remnants of ancient Roman salutation rituals. The bow encodes an entire philosophy of social hierarchy and humility that stretches back through centuries of Confucian thought. You perform these gestures automatically, without knowing any of this, because the gesture was handed to you and your body learned it before your mind could ask questions. Every greeting you give is a message from the past, traveling through your body, addressed to someone who also does not know they are receiving it. This might all sound like a reason for despair, or at least for a kind of vertiginous detachment from the traditions you thought were yours. But here is the counterintuitive truth that researchers of tradition keep returning to. Knowing where a tradition came from does not diminish it. It deepens it. When you understand that your grandmother's recipe crossed an ocean, survived a famine, adapted to 3 different kitchens, and landed on your table because of a chain of people who loved each other enough to keep cooking, the dish does not taste less like home. It tastes like more. It tastes like the whole improbable story of how your family arrived at this moment. When you understand that the holiday you celebrate was shaped by religious reform and commercial pressure and the romantic nostalgia of a Victorian England that was itself inventing its past, you do not have to abandon the holiday. You can hold it more honestly. You can decide what parts of it you want to carry forward and what parts you want to let go. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz wrote that culture is not a power, something to which social events, behaviors, institutions, or processes can be causally attributed. It is a context, a web of significance that human beings have spun and within which they are suspended. Geertz meant this as a description, not a trap. The web is not a cage. It is a structure that makes meaning possible. But you have to know you are in it. The traditions you keep are real. The belonging they create is real. The warmth of doing the same thing your parents did, of hearing the same words in the same order, of tasting the flavor that means home. All of that is real and it matters. Tradition is one of the most powerful technologies humans have ever developed for binding time together, for making the dead present, for making the unborn imaginable. But the most alive version of a tradition is not the one kept blindly. It is the one kept consciously. The one where you have asked the question, traced the thread, learned what it was built for, and then made the deliberate choice. Yes, I will carry this forward. This is worth passing on. That choice transforms you from an heir into a guardian, from someone living inside someone else's tradition into someone who has made it, finally, their own. Think again about the last tradition you kept. You did it because it felt right, because it felt like yours. Now you know something the people who handed it to you may never have known. You know it is yours because you chose it, and that makes it more yours than it has ever been.